All right, welcome back. Today we're going to talk about, it'll be a quick video. It is about bias, prejudice, and discrimination. So we're going to talk about three big concepts. We're going to talk about stereotype, we're going to talk about prejudice, and we're going to talk about discrimination. So after you watch this little mini lecture, I have a very timely worksheet for you to do, and I just want to say I made it because of the coronavirus, so please, it is not meant to be offensive. It is just what's going on right now, and so please take it with what it is. It's just a tool that's timely for you to practice these concepts. On the AP, usually, okay, it's very fair game. They want you to be able to distinguish between stereotype, prejudice, and discrimination. So, what is a stereotype? We talked about stereotypes before. A stereotype is a generalized, sometimes it can be accurate, but oftentimes it is very overgeneralized belief about a group of people. A stereotype can be positive or it could be negative, and it could be true. It could be false. Sometimes stereotypes do reflect reality. Young men tend to drive faster than elderly women. That would be a stereotype about young male drivers. That is probably accurate and true. But stereotypes can overgeneralize. Maybe there's a very conservative young man driver out there, and it can often exaggerate. There is a cognitive component to stereotype, what you believe about a certain group of people. And we talked about the dangers of using heuristics leading to stereotypes. So if you remember, a heuristic we talked about in the cognitive unit is a mental shortcut. And we talked about the availability heuristic can lead us to fear things that we should not be in fear of, and it can lead us to stereotype different people. So that is stereotype. We also, this is just a little review, we've talked about a stereotype threat. We talked about stereotype threat when we were talking about the cognitive unit as well, when we were doing testing. So stereotype threat is a self-confirming concern that one will be evaluated based on a negative stereotype. And where this came to play is when we talked about standardized testing. There is an old stereotype, remember we talked about in class, that women are not as strong as men in math, and they did this experiment where they gave a really hard math test to a group of men and women, and the women didn't do as well. They did a little second phase of the experiment where they gave this hard math test to a group of men and women, and before they administered the test, they made very kind of bolstering remarks that, they've noticed that women tend to do as well as men on this test, and lo and behold, the women did just as well as men. We also talked about with some of the standardized tests getting into college that they fear there's a stereotype threat with African American students, that they're buying in to this stereotype that they're not as smart as others, and so because they're buying into this stereotype about themselves, they are underperforming. So stereotype threat is a review. That is definitely fair game for the AP. Prejudice takes stereotype a little bit further. So remember, stereotype, that is just a belief. It could be positive, it could be negative, it could be accurate. With prejudice, we are now talking about a unjustifiable, so there's no basis, usually negative, okay, so we're talking about not positive feelings, negative feelings toward a group or its members. So prejudice generally involves stereotype beliefs, negative feelings, and a predisposition toward action. Now, we're not at action yet, we're just still at feelings, okay, but prejudice means prejudgment. So we encounter somebody that we have a stereotype against, and that colors our feelings. And that colored negative feelings, that is the prejudice. Prejudice is a negative attitude. An example of prejudice is ethnocentrism. Ethnocentrism is assuming the superiority of our own ethnic group. So we believe that somebody from a different ethnic group is somehow inferior or threatening. So we have a culture, our foods are the best. Our way of dress is the best. Our mannerisms are the best. Our, fill in the blank is the best. When you believe that your own ethnic group is the best and others are inferior, that is an example of prejudice, and that example is a specific example called ethnocentrism. Okay. It leads you to feel or dislike that person because they are different from you. They have different mannerisms, they have different cultures, maybe they have a different way of dressing or different foods they eat. Thinking that you're superior to their culture, that is ethnocentrism. And then we go up a little bit further. So we start out with these stereotypes that leads to prejudice, and then we end with discrimination. Discrimination is an unjustifiable, so again, there's no basis for this, negative behavior toward another group. So we've moved from our stereotype where we had our beliefs. Then we went up to prejudice, that is our attitudes. And then we now move up to how we behave toward another group of people or a person based on those prejudices and stereotypes. Discrimination is negative behavior. Passing over a person on a dating site because they are X, Y, or Z. Okay, rejecting somebody as a job candidate because they are X, Y, or Z. Not sitting next to somebody on the bus because they are X, Y, or Z. Okay, those are actions, those are behaviors that are negative. We are avoiding those people, we're scared of those people, we are fearing those people because of, right? We are not choosing not to go to a certain doctor because of who they are, that group of people. Race-related traffic stops, not sitting next to someone, those are great examples. Any action we take that's negative toward a group, that would be. So, just for fun, because this is a new word that I learned this year, is Karens. So, I came up with, to show you the difference between stereotypes and prejudice and discrimination, we're going to talk about Karen. All right, so here are some common Karen stereotypes. Okay, so remember, stereotypes are what we believe about. They could be positive, they could be negative, they could be true, but they could be false. So here's a common Karen stereotype. Karens are suburban soccer moms. Okay, here's another stereotype. Karens like to complain to the managers. Okay, here's another stereotype. Karens are anti-vaxxers. So all of those, they're overgeneralizations. Okay, they could be true, they could be not true, but those are examples of stereotypes. All right, moving on up the ladder to negative attitudes. So Karen prejudices. Okay, I don't like her because she's a Karen. Okay, so we have now a negative attitude toward a person that we assume fits into our Karen group. Okay, so I don't like her because she's a Karen. That would be a prejudice. Okay, we're moving on up to Karen discrimination. So here we go. I will not go over to my friend's house because his mom is a Karen. Okay, so here we are. It's a negative action, right? We've moved into behavior. We are not doing something because this person fits into this group. Another example. I will not wait on that person at my job because she's a Karen. Okay, again, we've moved into an action. We're doing something negative. We're avoiding them, okay, because they are of that group. So that is very light, obviously, and I am sure many of us have been subject to stereotypes and prejudice and discrimination. Now, it's just supposed to be fun. It's not to make light of it, but just to illustrate a very touchy subject. So again, this one was quick. I have a worksheet for you to show to me that you can tell the difference between, and really think there are some old stereotypes that have kind of come up recently because of where this coronavirus originated. And so it's really a big deal, and let's take a minute and check ourselves and think about, where all these thoughts and feelings are coming from. So I appreciate your time. Thank you very much. One more lecture to go. You guys are doing great.
Bye, Karen. Bye, Karen.